Well, I think the cautionary tale or the cautionary advice is based on history and is based on very careful assessment. I heard my brother Festus talking about the practicalities towards initiating the standby force. And once more, I think that the conversations about the standby force represents the lack of long-term planning. We know that a standby force concept basically is for member states of ECOWAS as one of the 5 regional building blocks of the African Union and the African Standby Force concept that authorizes member states to select members of their armed forces for training. And if you read the ECOWAS statement, communique, it talks about the ECOWAS Standby Force components. And I'm happy that my elder brother is back now. Part of those components relates to what? The civilian component, the logistics base that is supposed to be in Freetown, and all other things. The fundamental question here is whether those components mentioned in the communique have been established by member states and the levels of readiness that my big brother Festus mentioned. So the 30 to 90 days is all things being equal. You know, that the troops have been trained, they have done some joint training together, issues of language, hierarchy, command and control, that all these things have been dealt with. If we take two things, the logistics base that was supposed to be based in Freetown, there is no base to talk about. If we talk about the civilian component, it hasn't really been activated for years. So what we are talking about is just the reading of the official documents and the steps towards an intervention. The standby force idea was also, if you remember, and here I think I will crave Festus's indulgence to correct me if I'm wrong, was also to respond first and foremost to civil wars and not to constitutional changes or internal political misunderstandings where there is massive buy-in as to what is happening. I mean, there's no conflict in Niger per se. Okay, so triggering the standby force idea is what I term practicity in ECOWAS's response framework. That there rather ought to be a graduated set of responses as an internal crisis escalates. What we've seen is an automated response from ECOWAS from 0 to 100, making it difficult for them to pull back. Because the military intervention option is always the last option. Okay, but we decided to use that option. And then later on, when the 1 week passed and the junta was solidifying, decided to use mediation. Festus says only 8 out of the 11 member states were present. Now, 4 member states have undertaken a coup. Multilateral organizations function best when there is compliance to what they have voluntarily signed on to, and when there is a sense of bindingness relating to the values, the norms, the principles, and also the decision-making processes. if you look at the mechanism, Article 28.1, it specifies the processes for force generation that has not been followed. If you read or look at the structure, first defense chiefs would meet, the members of ministers of defense, whose decisions would then go up for consideration. Quite a number of these decision-making procedures and processes have been hopped over, and then we have taken the decision of last resort. When caution is given, it's not because those of us who are seeking a bit of caution don't believe in constitutionalism. But I think quite a number of us are looking at the geopolitics of an intervention, the multiplicity of interests, but also the potential that it might open a Pandora's box of quite a number of groups who may align not so much with the constitutional debate that has shifted now to a debate around identity, self-perception, exploitation of national resources, and how national resources can be used to benefit the populace. So there are multiple discourses and narratives that an intervention might tie into that might lead to unintended consequences.
And Professor Aning, on that point though, do you share in the ECOWAS concern of contagion, which appears to be fueling this approach? And if diplomacy hasn't worked elsewhere, why is there the view that possibly it will work in Niger? Hello, Professor Aning. Hello, Prof.
Yes. Hello. Sorry.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Those of us who are a little bit older in this technology game, sometimes we forget ourselves.
I understand that.
Yeah. I think the word contagion in this case is the wrong word. And if from the ECOWAS Commission, the assessments and the forecasting are based on the Niger crisis as a contagion, then they are totally wrong. Contagion relates to group action in which individuals are forced or are carried along without being convinced of the efficacy of the group action. If that is ECOWAS's thinking, then what in using the word contagion is that they accept that a number of member states are anti-intervention, but they are being intimidated one way or the other to join. Probably spillover is a better framework to look at it. Okay, so let's clear this. My suspicion is that when Dr. Abdel Fattah Musa used contagion, probably it was in the heat of the conversation, and probably there was a slippage somewhere instead of spillover. Niger is sitting at the crossroads and right at the center of multiple competing, contesting, and sometimes supporting dynamics. I'll beg Festus's indulgence. I think in theory, when you intervene in someone's country, the intervening force must have 3 times the firepower and the manpower of the country in which they are intervening. If Niger's army, based on the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's data of 7,000 personnel is correct, taking into consideration the fact that over the last 10 years, the US alone has pumped in close to $500 million of training, of logistics. The French have done the same. The Czechs and the Turks. what it means. And of course, China has put in 4.6 billion. The Wagner Group is hanging around. What it means is that we are going to face an army that is used to fighting in the desert, that is used to some of the finest arsenals, and that is fighting not for constitutionalism, because as Festus has said, the same organization that is fighting for constitutionalism in Niger has failed disastrously in the last 20 years in using the same yardstick when member states have failed. So for the people of Niger, this is a battle for identity. This is a battle for freedom. This is a battle against an invading force. And I want to go back to something that Festus said. When these young colonels were brought to Accra and spoken to as if they were kids, two things happened psychologically that once more ECOWAS hasn't learned from dealing with Charles Taylor. When Mr. Charles Taylor used to be brought to Accra, I always told the negotiating team, the way that Mr. Taylor dresses, the color of his dress, the type of walking stick, and the swagger with which he came down the gangway of the plane told you the state of his mind and how difficult the negotiations would be or how easy. ECOWAS did not learn. When these young boys were brought to Accra, they were ordered to get out because they wouldn't sit with them because they were in military fatigues. They then changed into natty suits, and look at them, they have now been accepted. They are now equals. When they left the conference center, they were not driven to the airport. They were driven to see the late J.J. Rawlings. And you can Google the advice Mr. Rawlings gave them publicly. So the optics are key. Forecasting is key. Doing risk assessments are key. And doing a psychological profiling of the people that you are going to talk to is very important. That gives those who are negotiating on behalf of ECOWAS to know that if Evans is in this natty dark suit, then this probably is how he's thinking. We are failing in the Niger case catastrophically as we have failed elsewhere.
Prof, how can ECOWAS pull back? How can ECOWAS pull back, considering that they've already taken this step? They've gone really far. They're meeting to draw a plan of attack. Yeah. You say, well, diplomacy. Can they pull back and how?
They can. If we are sincere about peace and generating the framework and the mechanisms for stability, the chiefs of defense staff, I am sure, will draw up the plan, but under it have this diplomatic face that they will be seized of the matter, opening an avenue for backdoor channel conversations. My advice is still similar to Festus's. It's negotiation. Backdoor channels in which ECOWAS's face is saved, the meeting of the heads of states and government, that authority is preserved, and then the junta in Niger is also given the opportunity to save face. Whatever it is, if we come to the negotiating table, ECOWAS will come from a position of weakness because it's failed in Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and it's made even grander statements in which it has had to pull back. Multilateral organizations function when its members voluntarily comply and bind themselves to the rules that they have signed on to. If we take 4 countries that are having coup d'etats, as against those that have not had a military coup d'etat, but have had constitutional coups. What it means is that what we are now looking at the credibility and the future sustainability of the ECOWAS project. Niger must be handled carefully.
And there's a prediction, Prof, and I want to quickly pick your thoughts on that this week, that depending on how this is handled, we may actually see 2 more coup d'etats before the end of the year. Is that something that you ascribe to?
Evans, you and I have spoken about this for a long time. If your colleague, Samson, was there, he would have cautioned me, please, no more forecasting from you today. I have moved on from Niger. From where I sit, Niger doesn't intellectually, operationally, emotionally excite me anymore. My interest now is what I've just said. How do we resolve Niger to prevent further destabilization, protect the credibility of ECOWAS, and even more importantly, nudge the heads of states in a direction that protects their authority and the respect that they need on the sub-region. The demographics have changed so much that there is a disparity in the thinking of this 1% elite that has governed since 1960 and the majority of West Africans who do not seem to benefit from the positive sides of democracy and economic liberalization. Niger is known as the frying pan of West Africa. Let us not act hastily to make it possible for us to say that we were wrong.